Yoga means skill in action, and what makes it the best is we have the world's best facilitator here, teacher here, yogi, Raj Yogi here. Sister Denise.
Thank you, Sister Sukanya. You probably don't realize who Sister Sukanya is, but she's a very, very special, powerful yogi. And Sister Chandru and I were really very good friends for nearly 50 years, working together in different ways, sometimes physically together, sometimes apart, but yeah, there's a long and marvelous history behind us. And the other senior yogis who have also passed on, and they left us a big legacy of their teachings, and we were apprentices because there were very few of us. Now there's many, so it's a bit difficult to be an apprentice when you have millions of people. I want to just put all this in context, and there are a number of definitions of yoga. So this first session we will do is looking at some of the definitions of yoga, because, you know, this word yoga is very well known. And generally speaking, people think of yoga as physical exercises. If you go to the airport, you will find yoga room, right? But you won't necessarily find people doing the kind of yoga that we do here. And there are different forms of hatha yoga. So hatha yoga means yoga by force. And what we do is called Raja Yoga. So there are comparisons between hatha yoga and Raja Yoga. But I will not be talking about hatha yoga. I'll be talking about different aspects of Raj Yoga. And Raj Yoga is first mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita, which is considered to be the oldest scripture of all scriptures, supposed to be 5,000 years old. So that's an ancient thing. And this Raj Yoga that we are studying is a practice. So we need to understand about the practice, and we also need to understand about all the philosophies behind it. And India is a place that has a multiplicity of philosophies. And this, what we do here is very particular. So I'll be talking about that. And I want to put it in the context of the Bhagavad Gita. So I have a big Bhagavad Gita with me here. Actually, the Gita is really small, but it gets padded with lots of comments by different people. But mostly, this is not full of comments. This one is translated by an American by the name of Winthrop Sargent, who was a customs officer. And, you know, there's another very famous customs officer, I think the painter Rousseau was a customs officer also. So you see, you may be looking like a very simple person, but behind that simple activity that you do for earning your living, there's a great philosopher, a great artist, a great soul. And if you have work which takes up all your time and attention and intellect and everything, then you don't really have time to do this kind of thing. So nothing is as it seems. So the descriptions and definitions of yoga are to be found in the Bhagavad Gita. And the ones that I'm going to be talking about are to be found in the second chapter of the Gita. And the Gita that you can buy in the shops has many things in it that are incorrect. And so you need a key to determine what's correct and what's incorrect. So according to the study that we do, it is our understanding that this study also takes the form of a key. And so what do you need keys for? Decryption. Right? How many of you know about decryption and encryption and this type of computer stuff? So you know what I'm talking about. You need a key. And keys are generally for locked doors or locked caskets. So in many ways, the Gita that you can get in the stores is locked. So what you can see is the outside, but we need a key to get inside. So we are looking at it in the context of the outside and applying some keys. So I'm going to read for you just 4 verses which talk about 2 definitions of yoga. And these are number 47, 48, 49, 50. So you can look at it. But there are many different versions of the Bhagavad Gita and all kinds of different translations. And I like this one for various reasons, mostly because you've got the Sanskrit, you've got 500 different meanings for each word. You can select which meaning seems to be the right one, which means different people select different meanings, which means you get tons and tons of different interpretations. So I will give you what I understand in the context of the keys that we learn in the Brahma Kumari's World Spiritual University. Is that okay for you? So, this we need glasses. So, you have a right to act, right? Freedom of action, freedom of speech, freedom of expression. This is part of the American Constitution. Maybe that too comes from the Gita. Never know. You have a right to action, but you do not have a right to the fruits of action. They will come, but you don't have a right to them. That means you should not demand the results of what you do when you want them. They will come in their own good time. Never should the fruit of action be your motive. So why do you do what you do? It's very important to consider. Why do you do what you do? If you do something good, why? Do you have ulterior motive? Or do you do it for love? Or do you do it for benefit? So yoga has a great deal to do with what motivates you to do what you do. It's important. You should not be attached to what is known as inaction in these translations, but it's really, you should not be motivated or you should not desire to not have any consequences of what you do. You will be called to account. Is that okay? Do you remember that all the time? There's no escape. You will be called to account. fixed in yoga, perform actions having abandoned attachment. Attachment means expectation. And having become indifferent to success and failure, it is said that evenness of mind is yoga. Evenness of mind. So normally the uneven mind gets elated when you have success and, how will we say, angry, in despair, disillusioned, frustrated, and generally down when there is failure. And so the normal human being is your mood, your feelings about what's going on is dictated by whether it appears to be successful or a failure, right? You experience this all the time. So you are going like this, swinging from high to low. And this is known as bipolar. That you have to go to the doctor and get some medication to make you even out. But actually, when you understand these things and you develop internal strengths and powers, then you get to be able to keep yourself stable so that things which seem to be really good, you don't take them that seriously. So you don't let them make you totally high. You say, okay, that's good. Fair enough. Get a success, that's good. Not more than that. It's not that brilliant. And you get, as they say, 15 minutes of fame, which doesn't last too long. So we can't really get carried away with it. And then you see when things don't work out, you get passed over, That's also very temporary. So your responses to these things need to be, it's okay, it's okay, it's good, it's okay, it's bad, it's okay. And practice to keep yourself even when things are all the time trying to make you go up and down. Is that good? Do you like that as a definition? So this is a very important part of yoga. And so going further, action is inferior to the yoga of wisdom. So what does the meaning of action? In the context of religion and spirituality, it's something like social service. Things that you do to benefit other people, because you need to clock up some good karma, right? Right? Have you got a big chunk of good karma under your belt, or do you not know? Bit difficult to calculate because you've been doing this for a number of lives, right? So you don't really know, but it must be a certain amount. So this type of thing, doing things, physical things, for the purpose of getting some, good deeds, right? Your good deed for the day. So that is inferior to the yoga of wisdom. So what is wisdom? Wisdom comes a long time after you start trying to figure out what's what in life, what's important, what kind of an ethical policy you will live by, what your principles are, what your bottom line is, what your values are. All of this gradually builds up along with life experience. You learn stuff along the way, and gradually you build up wisdom. And wisdom also comes when you study the laws of spirituality, you study the knowledge of the soul, karma, life, and gradually you become wise. So the sign of a wise person is that they know what they're doing, and they do it carefully, effectively, and they know what will be the result of what they do, short term, mid-term, long term, right? Wisdom. Seek refuge in wisdom. So you know stuff, but circumstances, external circumstances, make you forget what you know because of attraction and repulsion. And they make you swing up and down, success, failure. But when you know stuff, you're not taken in by, people think you're wonderful, marvelous, and fantastic 1 minute, and then the next minute they think you're the worst person in the whole world. So what? You have to be able to say, so what, for both of them. And then you get this evenness of mind gradually. So, despicable are those whose motives are based on the fruits of action. Despicable is quite a heavy word, right? So, do you mind heavy words? It's okay? Okay, so that's good. So, somebody who is exploiting other people, is that good? No, that could classify as despicable action. Somebody who is robbing, I think, if you really want to become very rich in the world today, you need to be an arms dealer or human trafficking or drug dealer, right? Get a lot of money like that. Could we classify that as despicable? It does facilitate a great deal of despair and horror and loss and destruction of life and so on. So it's talking about that. That means why you do what you do. When you earn your living, are you very aware about the karma that's connected with what you do? And so the motive of a person who wants a lot of money quickly is, I don't really care what it costs. And this is because that person doesn't imagine that sooner or later they will be called to account. No escape. So you get yourself into a big trouble when you get called to account, because you have to account for all the damage you've done. You have to pay. Better be rich. And it goes further. He whose wisdom is established casts off here in the world both good and evil actions. And this is asking us to think about how we are impressed with certain people who look pretty good, and how we are disgusted with people who are presented as very bad. And we experience this quite a lot because of social media. So in social media, there's nothing to stop somebody presenting another person in a very bad light, and everyone will believe it. Or somebody, who's maybe not that good deeply inside, but they're presented as the greatest thing there is in the world. So it's deceptive. And so we need to be able to get past those appearances. And it can also apply to parenting practices. There are some parenting practices, not nowadays, people are a little wiser, but in the older times, used to involve a lot of corporal punishment. And that was considered very good. And if you grew up getting beaten up all the time, that was considered quite a good foundation for life, you know. And then you would grow up and you'd do the same thing to your children, saying, oh, it was good enough for me, so it's good enough for you. Then finally, some sociologists and psychologists examined to see whether this was really a good idea, and they found it was a really bad idea. So then it went out of fashion. And it was considered so good to violate people and bad to let them be free. Now it's more the other way. So this matter of good and evil depends on your idea of good and evil rather than whether it's actually good and evil, you see. And so the idea behind it is, behind this statement, is that, you know, don't judge a book by its cover, and really go deep to understand what is good in the sense of it corresponds to the essential self, creates harmony, and what is bad, that means is opposite of what you really are and creates a lot of suffering and things like that. So we need to be able to do this type of moral reasoning. So the skill in performing moral reasoning is a very important part of yoga. When somebody is jealous of somebody else, then they will do whatever they can to damage that person. And they'll damage the person in the public eye, maybe physically, maybe emotionally, maybe financially. Do whatever you can to destroy somebody who has what you don't have and which you want. Who take it. So you have to be very careful about these kinds of hidden, buried internal motives, you see. So yoga is all about really understanding the importance of these hidden things. So it continues, therefore, devote yourself to yoga. So first definition we had is evenness of mind. And now we have another one, which is the title of this retreat, Yoga is Skill in Action. Do you like that? And action has many elements. But I wanted to start by reading these things to you so that you can understand this context. Because otherwise, if you learn about these things without a context, it's like hanging in the air like a balloon, not anchored to anything. And the Bhagavad Gita is said to be the oldest of all scriptures, which means that all the other scriptures of all the other religions are based on it. Nobody told you that. But when you study all these things, you find that's where it comes from. But nobody has time for that except somebody like me who thinks it's very interesting. And so you just believe what other people tell you because it's such a lot of work to check it. But it's really interesting to see what is derived from what and how it gets distorted, because it does get distorted also. And this is why I think it's really good. The study that we do here is keys to unlock many, many interesting doors and treasure boxes and so on. And it is said knowledge is power, right? You want some power? It's also said knowledge is a source of income. You want some income, right? So some power and some income, that's good. There are other kinds of yoga that I want to just draw your attention to that I jotted down along with those two, which I think is going to help us to understand what we really mean by yoga when it's nothing to do with physical exercises. There are some words from Sanskrit that I will tell you. You don't have to remember them or write them down. You can if you want, but just so that you've heard them. So one is Buddhi yoga, which means it has to do with your ability to focus your attention. It has to do with your ability to think in a logical, coherent, consistent, non-self-contradictory manner, whereby you can still appreciate and work with paradox. So your thinking is not just black and white. Many people just black and white thinking. It's either this or that. Anything else, forget it. That's very basic. That's too basic for you. That's for kindergarten. You don't want to be in kindergarten. You've been there, done that, got the t-shirt. Now you want something a little higher, right? So you need to develop your intelligence. So Buddhi yoga develops your intelligence, your ability to detect whether something is logical or not, coherent or not, meaningful or not, useful or not, and whether it makes sense. One of the things that happens very often, especially in a religious context, because all of these spiritual things are generally in a religious context, right? So in a religious context, you require something called a suspension of disbelief. Have you heard that expression before? Suspension of disbelief, which is somebody tells you something you have to believe, but you don't believe it. And then they tell you, no, you have to believe it. And then if you go along with it and say, okay, I'll believe it, in order to believe something that you don't believe, you have to suspend part of your intelligence, which doesn't believe things that are not believable. So, for example, there are concepts in different religions which the students of those religions will question. Like I remember when I was about 5 years old and I was told that a certain time will come, which is called the Day of Judgment. And at that time, all the people will come out of their tombs and they'll all get judged. And I thought, you know what? They won't be in any condition to be judged. I don't think that's going to work. This is how 5-year-olds think. By the time you've got a bit older, you've been knocked into shape and you believe those things that are actually not believable because they are there because they have a symbolic meaning. But you are expected to believe that the symbol is a reality. And if you challenge it, they'll say, faith, faith, have faith, believe. And you say, well, sorry. Blind faith. That's why you have to have suspension of disbelief, blind faith. So when you really activate your right to have answers to your questions, this is called developing your intelligence. So yoga includes this development of this capacity. And then there is another thing which is called Gyan yoga. Gyan yoga, that means that it's very connected with Buddhi yoga. Gyan yoga means the yoga of knowledge. You see. And so it's about information. You receive information about reality, about your identity, about the meaning of your life, etc., some of which is accurate, some of which is inaccurate. So the first thing, the most basic thing that is inaccurate is that you get told for generations that a human being comes in two types, either male or female. I see. This is incorrect. A human body comes in two types, but not a being. I see. So then you have to ask yourself, well, let me check, am I a being or a body? You have to think about that. Because the person who tells you a human being comes in two types, either male or female, that means they're telling you that a being is an object. And then you have to decide for yourself whether you're an object or not. Are you an object? Not really. How many people are objects here? Not a single one? Oh, that's great. We're beings, but a being has to have an instrument to express. And so we are embodied beings. And so the body comes in different colors, male, female. Every single face on earth at any time, past, present, future, is different from any other face. Can you imagine how amazing that is? Because they all have more or less two eyes, nose, mouth, ears, cheeks, eyebrows, but they're all different. This is why the security people have figured out facial recognition, right? Because it's relatively reliable because all the faces are different. Why are they different? Your face looks very different when you're asleep and when you're awake. Have you noticed? Well, you're asleep, but so you won't notice. But you get someone else to look at you when you're asleep or when you're awake. Because when you're awake, your personality is coming through, right? When you're asleep, you're mostly like peaceful, and you wake up. So what is that? That's the being coming through with facial expressions and many things that we use our bodies for to express ourselves. Then there's another kind of yoga, which is called karma yoga. So you probably heard that more than the others, karma yoga. And different people interpret it in different ways. So this word karma is very fashionable. It's become part of the English language, and it's interpreted in various ways. But the essential meaning of karma is action. So you just heard about do not be attached to inaction. And this is because in the regular concepts that you find in the Gita, there is the expression karma and akarma, which is interpreted as karma is either you're doing something or you're not doing anything. And the belief in certain yoga philosophies is that if you do something, it'll put you in bondage. Therefore, it's better to do nothing. And then if you check this syllogism, you find that there's a lot of faulty logic connected with it, you see. So if you do something, it might be good, or it might be bad, or it might be ordinary, or it might be boring, or it might be meaningless, or it might be stupid. It could be lots of things. It's much more than anything you do is bad. No. Some things you do may be bad. Some things you do may be good. Other things you do may be a waste of time. There are many different kinds of things. And then doing nothing, if you're doing nothing, you're dead. Right? Because even breathing, it counts as karma. So when there's absolutely no karma going on, you are dead. So actually, you cannot be attached to being dead because that doesn't make any sense. So that means we have to get further information. What is this thing called karma? And what is this thing called akarma? So one thing we learn in this spiritual university is there's actually 3 kinds of karma, generally speaking. So one is negative karma. You could figure out what that might be. Another one is positive karma. You could figure out what that might be. And another one is called neutral karma, which you could not figure out. And so the study that we do in order to understand yoga, in order to have yoga, requires that we understand very well the philosophy of karma. And so in a general way, yoga requires that you understand what you are, which means you have to decide firmly and clearly for yourself whether you're an object or a being. You seem to have done that. You're beings. Now we have to know what a being is. Anybody can tell you what a body is, and the body parts, and this one does this thing, and your blood does such and such a thing, and your nerves do such and such a thing, and your muscles do like this, and then you become a physiologist, a medical doctor, or something like that. But there's no information about the being. One of the reasons is because the being is not physical. You see, anything which is physical, there is a case for saying it's an object. So we have the physical body, but it's animated by the spirit and the being. So we can say that the being is an animating force. It's an energy. But it's not, you don't plug in and charge up that way. That you do for your car or your cell phone, which tries like anything to mimic a human being so that you can prove that a being is an object. But still, there are things missing. We have, everybody's into artificial intelligence, right? But it's still artificial, fake, which mimics some of the things that intelligence is said to do, like calculation and figuring stuff out. But, you know, it doesn't really understand things like love. It's out of range. And love is a spiritual quality which can be demonstrated through a loving action, through a body. But love itself, you can't put your finger on it because it isn't anything material. You can detect the presence of it when a being acts in a loving way, right? But love itself, you can't catch it. People like peace, right? And so, what is peace? In the Hindi language, there is this word Shanti, and you will hear us using the word Om Shanti all the time. Have you heard that already? Yeah. So why do we do this? What does it mean? You know. And it's a useful expression. It's also a mantra. So a mantra is a piece of advice. So Om Shanti means it is advisable to persist in a state of peace and then come into action. So you start off potential, become kinetic, return to potential, become kinetic. So the soul at rest is not doing anything yet consciously. There's automatic activity going on when the soul is present in the body. You don't have to tell your blood, would you please flow? It knows what to do. You don't have to tell your lungs, would you please breathe? Or when somebody's in big trouble, you do tell them, breathe, because sometimes your reaction to big trouble is you just freeze. You breathe. Okay, I'll breathe. That's to do with shock, but ordinarily your lungs know what to do. Your hair knows to grow. You don't have to tell it, would you please grow? I mean, some people do want their hair to grow because they get bald, things like that, but otherwise it knows to grow. And other basic things, they happen by themselves. So these are called non-conscious actions. So while they are karma theoretically, but there's no question of choice about doing the right thing or the wrong thing, right? So when we are talking about karma that you have to pay attention to and that you have to think about your motives, it's all about what will you do in terms of your relationships with other people and your relationships with nature and your relationships with the divine. So these are these three areas where yoga applies, your relationships. And this is why it's called skill in action. You don't have to be a skilled breather or something like that. I mean, it's quite good, but you need to be skilled in relating with people who are very different from you. And people have their own values and their own needs and their own boundaries. And so there's a lot of negotiation involved in sharing a place to live or a city or whatever it is. And your relationship with nature is important because if your relationship with nature is balanced, then nature will serve you very well, provide you with water, air to breathe, food to eat, things to build your places with, transportation. I mean, all the things you need come from nature. But if our relationship with nature is out of balance, then nature gets depleted and then we have scarcity. So that's also an important thing to be skilled in your relationship with nature so that the bounty of nature continues to avail itself to you indefinitely. Nowadays, we have this thing called climate change, which is said to be human-induced. So human-induced implies that people have taken more than they need, and nature wasn't able to replenish. And then eventually it says, sorry, run out. Starve. You may starve. You may die of thirst. You may get too hot or too cold. Sorry, I did my best. Yeah, like that. Then your relationship with the divine is mysterious because the divine is non-physical. And so therefore it's very important in yoga to come into and know how to come into the spiritual dimension. Because mostly we are operating just in the dimension of matter, right? And mostly we operate on the surface of our face. What you see, what you smell, what you hear, what you taste, and then your skin. And there's an expression, beauty is skin deep. You need the inner beauty also. And so we aren't naturally spiritual, but we live in a culture globally which is materialistic. And this first indicator of materialism is to declare that humans come in two types, males and females. And then people make a logical conclusion that in that case, there must be male souls and female souls. There's faulty logic. There are male and female bodies for reproductive reasons, because if you notice, your soul is said to be immortal, yeah? Your body is said to be perishable. So if you get immortal souls in a perishable body and you only have one gender, you'll run out real quick. Then what will you do? You see. So we need arrangements for reproducing bodies because souls outlast bodies by a long way. And so then comes the matter of reincarnation, you see. There are some religions and cultures that subscribe to the idea of reincarnation and some don't, you see. But generally speaking, the Abrahamic religions don't. That means Islam, Christianity, Judaism, they do not subscribe to the idea of reincarnation. Although when you get into the esoteric version of those religions, then they start talking about it. But it's only for people who go really deep into that study and practice. In Buddhism, they believe in reincarnation, but they don't believe in the soul. So it's a bit difficult to reincarnate if you're not a soul. It's better. It gets complicated, So in Hinduism, there's much more information about these things. And it's also talked about a lot in the Bhagavad Gita. And so to take into consideration that there is such a thing as continuity, and in what form does that continuity take, and how do you understand it? That means you need to activate your consciousness to be able to deal with things that are invisible as well as things that are visible. And actually, there are lots of invisible things, like spooky. Spooky? If something's spooky, you say it's spooky, right? And how do you know it's spooky? Well, it feels spooky, but it's not physical. But you say, this is spooky. Or you say, this feels really nice here. Nice. What is nice? Very mysterious word, nice. But it's like you feel safe, comfortable. You don't feel any bad vibes, good vibes. But what are vibes? Are they physical? No. So that means you do have this instrument for detecting invisible things, but it's not very refined. And so part of the process of learning about yoga is refining your capability of appreciating, understanding, and perceiving non-visible things. You see. Now, everybody has a mind, right? Have you ever seen a mind? Nobody's ever seen a mind. Everybody has one. Nobody's ever seen one. They say a brain. Yeah, brain. Looks like a walnut, right? And if you eat walnuts, it's good for your brain. So there's a connection. But, So does your brain think? Difficult question to answer, right? Because somebody who's very intelligent, they say, oh, it's a brainy person. If you check everybody's brain, they're more or less, similar. You can't just take out brains from different people's skulls and see who's clever, who's not clever, who's, sensible, not sensible. You can detect which bit of the brain is connected with speech and other things, mechanical things to do with sense perception. All right? Because you have eyes to be able to see. But do your eyes see or do you see? Do your ears hear or do you hear? You hear. So this is what you have to start doing in yoga, is analyzing all these things that we don't really think about much because of this assumption that everything is just matter. But now we start to hear that there is this combination, the embodied soul, which animates the body and which after some time leaves the body. How do you know somebody's dead? Well, there are no further vital signs, you see. So that's signs of life. So if life is there, there's movement, but you can't actually detect life itself. You can detect if it's there or not, because it does something or it doesn't. So vital signs can be detected in the physical body, but life itself cannot be detected because it's invisible, you see. So the soul is the living being which animates the body, which is basically an object. It's a very excellent object, very complicated. They try to make robots, but they're not as good as the real thing, right? So, there's much that is in the soul that cannot be replicated by science. And so the study of yoga and understanding of yoga is all about understanding what am I, who am I, and how should I function? And so for this, you need to understand as much as possible about this thing called the soul, this animating force, because the mind is part of that, not part of your brain. That's why you don't know what it looks like, because it's not a thing. There are some things that you can say about it which are helpful. You could say that it's an instrument for perceiving invisible things or intangible things or non-material things like atmosphere, like someone's intention, like do they love me or is it just fake? Because when you come into a relationship with another human being, you will do it if there is a resonance between you, the soul, and that other soul, which means the presence of love is a good thing to have. That you feel that person is pure in their intentions, right? So these qualities, love, purity, also peace, bliss, and power, These are elements of the soul. The body is made up of 5 elements of matter: air, earth, fire, water, ether. These are stable elements. Then you have all the other elements unstable. The stable elements. And you know your body is 70% water, right? I don't know the percentages of the rest, but 70% water. I mean, it lets you realize that your body is basically a leather bag filled with warm mud. That's not a person, but it's an instrument, a very complex instrument with all of the requirements for the soul to express itself, interact with other beings and with nature in a meaningful way. But that understanding of how this all works has been forgotten or lost or something like that. And because of that, we get ourselves into trouble due to doing negative karma that we think is positive, due to getting out of harmony, out of balance with each other, with nature, due to having no clue at all what the divine is or what yourself is. And so then you say, hey, I need information. And so this is why the first part of yoga has to do with an accumulation of information that is not about matter. And therefore it has to be considered carefully, because you have to decide whether it's true or not. And so you have an instrument in your soul for figuring out whether something's true or false, right? Can you tell if somebody's lying to you or not? Sometimes, sometimes not. That means your ability to detect true and false is a bit rusty, a bit out of focus. So part of what happens in yoga is you're tightening up this capacity to distinguish right from wrong. And there are different words for this. One of them is your conscience. How many times per day do you do something that's against your conscience? Average 5 or 6 per day, every day of your life. That's quite a lot. And it's usually small things. But what happens when you act against your conscience is it loses functionality. And then it's no longer reliable. So if you have an instrument and you don't use it correctly, it will lose functionality, right? And then you get fed up with it and you want a new one. And so you can't get a new soul because that's it, you're it. But what you can do is upgrade it. And that means it has to be essentially restored to its original condition. So this is one of the purposes of yoga, to restore the self to its original, pure, peaceful, powerful, loveful, blissful condition, when all of these elements of the self are at 100%. Because at the moment, the percentage is low. And if you think of yourself as a power, a spiritual power, which is operating this body, sometimes you feel tired, less energy. Sometimes religious people call to God and say, oh God, give me strength. There's also power. So there are a number of different circumstances where we become aware that we are disempowered or powerless or low energy, something like this. And so we can say the soul has become weak, run out of juice, and so we need charging up. So part of yoga is also charging up. So you have to charge up from a source which is charged up. So if we say all of humanity is more or less weak, you can't charge up from another person. But sometimes you try to charge up from another person. Will you please love me? Right? I need to be charged up by somebody's love. Oh, will you please just be there for me? You know, will you please do my stuff for me? All these things, we want to get things done through other people because we feel intuitively that a person has energy. And we also feel that we are running low on energy. So maybe we get a bit of some from somebody else. Have you come across energy vampire? Yes. That means, you know, if everybody's low on energy and the low energy people are trying to take the energy from some other low energy person, you can die. So you don't want that. Therefore, there needs to be a source which is not human. So sometimes people try to get energy from nature. You go and hug a tree, you go sit by the ocean, you get something, but somehow it's not enough. Because though nature has its own energy, it's also depleted. It's also disempowered. So the whole planet, the people, nature, everything is low energy. And so at such a time, it has to be restored. And so this is why it's useful to have a connection with the divine, because this is your source. But if you don't know where it is, what it is, how to connect, then, you know, you're like somebody with a car and you open up the petrol thing and then you look for a gas station and they don't have any gas. And the other day I was with someone, we wanted to charge up the car, it's an electric car, and all the electric stands were down. So we go to another one. All the other people go to the other one. You know, they were half down. There's one place available for lots and lots of people charging, sitting there waiting in line. Someone skips the line, you know. So there is this thing in the human being which is to do with I need power. And this is spiritual power. You want physical power, you go eat something. It will charge up your body. You also have to rest because you need to rest to get restored. But spiritually, you need to have a source which is beyond. And that's we call the divine or God or the supreme being or something like this. They're different names. But it is something intangible. So the main thing, what yoga is about, is learning how to operate both in the physical and the non-physical dimensions. Because we beings, we embodied souls, are actually spiritual beings. We're not material objects. And when the soul gets depleted, then it needs to go into the non-material dimension of light, spiritual light, and connect with that source, which is also light. And that connection is also called yoga. You see, so what we do in Brahma Kumaris, we practice something called Raj Yoga. And Raj Yoga means the yoga by which you become a king. And so a king is not just something about a political arrangement where you are a dictator, autocrat, everybody else is your slave. It's not that kind of king. But a king means somebody who is in command of their kingdom. And so there are a number of kingdoms. You've heard of the animal kingdom, right? So that we know, but it's not like a political thing. The animal kingdom has lots of different kinds of animals in nature, and they all are more or less in harmony with each other, except for the humans who don't understand how these things work. So we need to learn. And so the first kingdom, the first area of your kingdom is your mind, your intelligence, your personality. And so how your mind functions, how your intelligence functions, how your character is up to you. You are the king. And then you have to ask yourself, how is my kingdom? How is my relationship with my mind? Does your mind give you trouble? Anytime. So then you have to be a master who knows how to operate the mind in such a way that it doesn't give you trouble. You see, where do your emotions live? In your mind. So you have a whole big spectrum of emotions that come along. Some of them are nice, some of them are not so nice, But a king is somebody who is in command of your landscape of emotions. And sometimes your intelligence is not working too well, So you need to be able to make sure that your intelligence is logical, coherent, consistent, meaningful, and all that. Then it will serve you. So your mind, your character, your intelligence, all of these are your kingdom, your inner kingdom. And it's really nice when you have all the things which are operating well, in harmony, and they do what you want. And your relationship with them is not like forceful one, but it's a very natural, harmonious one. So this is the first level of king. Then the next level of kingship is your family. And, the sort of traditional idea of a family is, the father is the king and the mother is the queen and the kids are the princes and princesses, like that. I don't know if we have president and vice president and secretary and treasurer in a family, but something equivalent to that. And so you have to organize your relationship with the other people in that format, whichever format the family takes. And you need to be in command of how you handle if they're nice to you or not nice to you, because they may be either way. And then you have to share the space, share the resources. So you need to know how to negotiate with all the other people. And so that you understand what your rights are, you understand what your responsibilities are. This is a kingdom. Then you go further in your education system and experience, your village, your town, your country. All of these things are all to do with politics. And politics is understanding how people operate in combination with each other. It's politics. Nothing to do with election selection and this and that. It's diplomacy. And so yoga is also very much about being skilled in diplomacy. And so this is also part of skill in action, because how you interact with other people who may have different agenda from you, they may have different values from you, they may be having good intentions, bad intentions, whatever it is, and you need to operate in the midst of all that. And the first thing you need to know is what's going on. Because very often what it seems to be going on is not what's actually going on. And therefore you need good powers of detection. And these are also skills in the soul, that you can detect what someone's intention is, how they feel about you, what they want, what they're hiding. Because then you know what you're dealing with. Sometimes people say, well, I don't like it when people lie to me. What's wrong with you? You need to know if they're lying or not. What you don't like is that they lied to you and you didn't get it. All right? And so if you say, I don't like they lied to me, no, that's not what's going on at all. You didn't get it. That's what's going on. So you need to upgrade your ability to detect if someone's lying or not. What you need in order to do that is you need to be 100% honest. Because if you are, you can see it. If not, you can't. That's a phenomenon, you see. And as you develop yoga, you begin to realize that it is so, it is like that, you see. Now, you remember I asked about how many times you go against your conscience, and basic average, like generous average, is 5 or 6 times per day, every day for your whole life, which means nobody's really honest. Some people are really, really dishonest. Some people are slightly honest. There's a whole spectrum. But yoga involves observing yourself and with the intention of increasing the extent to which you are true to yourself. Because yoga is to do with being real, true. You've heard this expression, to thine own self be true, right? It comes from Shakespeare, comes from Hamlet. So there's one guy who's, I forgot his name, Polonius or something, and he's talking to his son. And his son is grown up and he's going away. So he has to be independent of his father. So there is this long soliloquy in which he tells him important things about how to handle himself in life, as an adult. And it ends up with this expression, to thine own self be true. But that's the bottom line. And so yoga is very much about making yourself so clear, so true to yourself that you know exactly what your character defects are. Then you know what you're working on. See, no point in feeling guilty. That's not going to do any good at all. A complete waste of time. It's illogical, incoherent, and unnecessary. And it anyway makes you lose your power. So don't bother with that. The idea is to detect, what is it about me that's true to myself? Which bits of me are not true to myself? And then adjust it so that everything lines up the way you want it, you see. Because you know yourself like nobody else knows you, right? And so you're the one who has to adjust yourself to be exactly the way you want to be. And there are many things that happen in life which create distortions in the soul. And it's not good or bad, it's just the way it is. Distortions happen. And that's all right. If you didn't have any distortions, there's no point in learning yoga. So you start with all sorts of things that need to be worked on. And you have to identify them. Some of them are very, very subtle and invisible, and it might take you 1,000 years to actually find out. We only have one lifetime, so you have to be quick. but it takes time. So don't die too early. You need time, because these things are, they escape your attention. You're so used to them that sometimes there has to be some really important circumstance or event which shocks you on some level, so that you say, oh my God, yeah, I shouldn't be doing that. But you've been doing it for years thinking it's just fine. All of a sudden you think it's not fine. And this is one of the things that happens with yoga practice, and we're going to do some in a minute, that your standards of how you evaluate yourself slowly get more refined. And this is also why in this practice you have to be very, very patient with yourself and with other people, because it takes forever to get perfect, if you ever get perfect. But it's improvement, right? And the improvement has to do with returning to your original condition. And the soul is non-physical, but it vibrates. Sometimes you can think of it as a radiance, a radiant point of light, which vibrates with love, peace, purity, bliss, power. And this kind of oscillation corresponds to a note, a musical note. Everybody has their own note. And when your note is flat, you have to tune it up, make it right. So yoga is also something about tuning up. So when you're connected with the divine source, that also is a form of, one thing is drawing power into yourself, and the other is tuning yourself or attuning yourself to that one. You see? So these are some definitions of yoga. Does it all make sense to you? Do you have any questions so far on this topic? Clear? Complicated?
I was wondering, how do we become strong when we're weak? We really want to become strong, and yet we continue to be weak.
Well, if you remember, it takes time. We have to have patience. And for a long time, we never get it quite right. And so part of the process of yoga is figuring out these very subtle, you want to raise your level of consciousness from relatively gross to progressively refined. So that takes time. And you know how oil turns into petrol? They burn it. And so you want to extract the essence of the crude oil until it becomes gasoline, jet fuel. And so it's a process of refinement using heat. And so it is said for yoga that, there's a lot of concentration involved. If you have a lens and you put the sun through it and put a paper under it at the focal point, it's very hot and it will catch fire. And this is an analogy for this process of concentrating. We have to concentrate our attention, first of all, on our own self, which is an inward turn in. And so we call that soul consciousness or various things like that. And then, this divine source is analogous to the sun. The sun is physical fire, but that one is spiritual energy. And we want to be first focused on ourselves and then focus on that. And it's a very subtle thing. It's like you have a laser pointer You want to point it to a star some few light years away. It's very difficult because how will you do that? It's very difficult. It's like that. And so you have to be very patient to get, first of all, you need to take the time to concentrate on yourself first. Because when we keep ourselves in gross consciousness, it's impossible. So we have to take time to first of all say, okay, now let me just bring myself slowly, slowly into the consciousness of the soul and then focus there. You see, so we have to learn how to do it. It's skill. It's also an act. So actually, this is a part of skill in action. And then we need to take power. Now, you cannot calculate how much you are disempowered in comparison with how you would have possibly been full of power in some ancient time when you were completely full. It's too difficult to detect that. But what you can do is understand that basically I need power, I'm weak, and so patiently fill yourself with power. There are certain things we do such that all of our power drains out. So then we have to learn how to detect that. When I do something that's draining out my power, plug it up. Your spiritual power gets drained out by thinking negative thoughts or by getting, this obsessive compulsive thinking. It really drains out everything. Or you think about something that doesn't matter, drains out your energy. So therefore we have to watch ourselves and make sure that we're not being counterproductive in between the times when we're actually attending to our meditation. But you remember I talk about karma yoga. So karma yoga means you try to be connected while doing basic stuff. So there are many things we do which are boring, repetitive. You don't want to do them, but you have to do them. Chores, things like that. So it's quite efficient to say, okay, while doing this or that chore, I will practice meditation, because you don't need much of your attention on the chore because it's repetitive. You know what to do, so do it. Then what about the rest of your mind? Where's that going? All over the place. So use that amount of your intelligence in your mind to connect. And then you're developing the skill of being in yoga while in action. And this will also make your action more accurate. Interesting. When you're cooking in yoga, it always tastes really good, because there's something that happens to the things you're cooking connected with your vibrations that makes it extra special good. And anything you touch when you're in yoga is somehow influenced in a very positive way. So, when you pay attention on all these things, it gets very effective. But we forget. We're busy with something else, distracted, this and that. So it's constant effort to bring your attention back to where you want it to be. And this is how you gradually take command of all of your different kingdoms. And it takes time. And it's subtle. And so be prepared for the long haul. So you kind of integrate it into your life as it is, you see. Integrating these ideas into your thinking, how you practice, how you bring these things into action. So let's just have a quick moment of silence to end this part. Om Shanti.